So what I'd like to do this morning, I'd like us to take a look at just some of the facts and the numbers behind the influence that we have as women. Because I think the manner in which we sometimes address the issue of gender diversity and our role in society is perhaps not quite in the same way that we should be presenting it in terms of the language. So that's what I'm going to do then. In the second part, what I'd like to do is to bring it closer to you as individuals, because it takes what everybody does as an individual for us as a collective to make a difference. So those are the two ways in which I'm going to be approaching this discussion. The title of the presentation is Diversity and the Bottom Line. And the reason I've called it this is because I think, number one, we need to get first things right first. And that is, we need to change the language that we're using. Because when you think about it, the whole issue of our role in society, not only in our homes, but in our businesses, in governments, it's not an issue that is about a social injustice. Yes, it is a social injustice. But much more important than that, it's an economic and business imperative. The reality is that we make up the most significant portion of populations around the world. And so if we're unable to tap into the talent that is locked within us, certainly if governments and businesses are unable to tap into the talent that is within this room and many other women like us, then certainly we will not be able to deal with many of the issues that the world is facing today and will continue to face tomorrow. I think I once heard, I often go from time to time to the World Economic Forum, and Klaus Schwab, who founded it, says it very well when he says that a nation's competitiveness is really going to be, it will be positioned well if that nation is able to tap into the over 50% of its population, and that is who we are. The fastest growing demographic in the world today is not people. It's machinery, it's software. When you look around the world, you see that, some of the largest populations are coming from emerging economies. And so you need to be looking at issues of this growing middle class that is coming from places like Asia, like Latin America, and from sub-Saharan Africa. How do you then make sure that when you look at some of these changes, you look at this growing middle class from all of these emerging economies, how do you find solutions to the growing demand that we'll be having from these voracious consumers in the face of declining capacity? Declining capacity of food, declining capacity of fresh water. The solutions have to come from all of us. And so that is why I say it's not just a social injustice, it's an economic and a business imperative. The purchasing power of women is significant. $3.3 trillion per annum. That is significant. And so for companies like Unilever, all of these companies that are targeted at consumers, they need to be thinking about how do we respond to women. The reality is that sitting here, we may be very far from very deep markets as South Africa, but the reality is that in sub-Saharan Africa, we know that 6 of those economies were amongst the top 10 growing economies in the world last year, okay? Top 10 fastest growing, 6 of them were in sub-Saharan Africa. So the biggest growth is coming from here. And so when you look at a number of the global organizations, they are looking at our economies and saying, how do we position themselves to these consumers? How do we position ourselves to these economies? And ultimately, it comes down to every single person in this room, because we define what the trends are going to be. And then, of course, purchasing decisions. In the US and I think around the world, you'll find that a significant portion of the decisions in the homes are being made about women, about what brands to buy, and all of those purchasing power decisions. Certainly, research shows us also, additionally, that the percentage of businesses that are privately held in privately held in South Africa by women has increased substantially. We see that against the global averages, that South Africa actually has been doing far better than the rest of the world. And also we see that South African women currently hold, more positions in senior management roles than in the rest of the world, 27%. Which is higher than the rest of the world, where on average it's about 20%. So as much as, yes, it is still lagging. We still need a lot more representation of women in management, in businesses, but certainly we see that the strides are being made. It is not something that is insignificant in South Africa. And I guess a large part of it also has been because it's been legislated. When you look at, for instance, Norway, where it was legislated, so that has been a driver. I think furthermore, when you look again at the statistics in terms of the influence that we have as women around the world, you see that nearly 10.4 million companies are owned by women. I mean, that is significant. And then you look at the number of people that is employing, and of course, the revenues that it produces. Approximately $2 trillion. That is significant. It's huge influence. But the reason why you don't see it being used all together, we tend to be quite fragmented. And I think that's why it's important for us, when we get together as women, to be looking at what a force we are as women around the world, but also just, in our country as well. And so we see also in terms of just globally, moving away from South Africa, we see that 41% of all privately held women are businesses that are owned by women. So it's something that is important. It's showing just the emergence of businesses that are owned by women. And then 3/4 of all women-owned businesses are majority owned. And it's important to make the distinction, because you can find that a business is 10% owned by a woman or 25%, but it's important to make the distinction of a business that is majority owned by a woman, because that is when you're able to really influence how that business is run and the cash flow of that business, etc. And that is why we make that distinction. And then you see, of course, the revenues that it generates. There was, a launch by Dell Computers. And they came up with a computer that was specifically made for women. And it was a complete flop, because when it was launched, women felt it was quite patronizing. It was a pink, computer, and it was, and the manner in which it was launched was not, it did not, appeal to women at all, because, so therefore we want, these large organizations to be looking at how they can present products that are appealing to us, but it needs to be done well. I think the good thing that Dell did was that they responded very quickly to that. Very quickly, when they realized that it hadn't worked, they changed it and went back to a different strategy. Once again, we see something that you often will not hear about. For instance, in the US, many women have served in the military. And so we are not just in specific areas in society, but we are across many facets of society, and we are playing a role that often is not recognized or is not even known. You are the CEO of yourself. I am the unshakable, unanimously elected CEO of Phuthi Mahanyele Incorporated. You are the CEO of you. You decide what income your company is going to earn. You decide what vision you have for your company. Your life is your business. It comes down to what each one of us does in order for all of us as a collective to make a difference. And it starts with each person taking that responsibility of becoming the most effective CEO of yourself that you can, of your own life. And so at some point, you need to be willing to take a moment, take some time, and think about, what is the vision for your life? What is it? Outside of all the circumstances, what is the vision for your life? What are the values that are important to you? What is the income that you should be generating for yourself and for your stakeholders, your family, everybody? And we have an ability to learn from others. Take the best run organizations in the world and use those principles. and say, how can you run yourself most effectively? There's a book that's been written called Me Incorporated, which speaks to this, about how you can run your life most effectively. And this then takes us from finding ourselves going from one situation to another through circumstances, and in a way, not being fully accountable for everything that happens in our lives and the many decisions that we make in our lives. But ultimately, we have to make those decisions. And it is important, because that is how we begin to make a difference. That is how we begin to contribute more meaningfully to society, not only just broader society, but just amongst the very people that are in our lives. Most people find themselves in the complacency zone. Someone now reaches a certain age, they look back on their lives, and when they look at everything that's happened, it's kind of happened because this led to that, and then that led to this, and this led to that, and and they don't necessarily feel fully accountable because stuff just happened. What I hope today is that I can disturb you. I want to disturb you out of your comfort zone, because comfort zones will not make us meaningful contributors. We have to be effective in our lives. And it's not just about effective, meaning that you have to earn the most money, but it's about being effective in using your God-given talents and skills. Look after yourself and make sure that you are using your skills to the very best of your capabilities. What often happens is that you end up in a crisis zone at some point. Many people, unfortunately, will find themselves in a crisis zone. Crisis zone is where tragedy happens. And now they're in this situation. And in some situations, you'll find that because of the crisis zone, they were able to change and relook at their lives and change their whole vision for their lives. But must it take a crisis for you to make a change about your life, to start thinking a lot more about what you need to be doing? Does it have to take a tragedy? Really? What it needs to be, you need to make sure that you get yourself in a purpose zone. Be able to look at your life and know that you have used your skills, you have used your talents to the very best that you could, the very best that only you could. And so, what is it that often gets in the way of that happening? And I'll share a few stories using myself as an analogy. I think one of them that gets in the way is, first of all, I think we give up too soon. When you look at most organizations, some of the businesses that have done very well in the world, we see that one of the things that they've done is they've persevered. A small country, South Africa, we have one of the highest number of organizations that have been in existence beyond 100 years. The reality is that for those organizations to survive, for us to have women in senior roles representing the rest of women in those companies, it will take resilience. Somebody has to be willing to stay there longer. And when I talk to a number of my friends who are either on boards of companies or are CEOs or directors in their organizations, a number of them do leave because it is difficult. It is hard. Because there are so few of us, it is difficult to always be the only one in the room. Because what you'll find is that from time to time, you'll be the lone voice with a different point of view. And because you weren't there when the guys were playing golf or whatever it is that they were doing together, you're not part of the conversation. And so you've got a completely different view. What you don't realize is that the board meeting actually happened on the golf course. What is happening here is really just a statutory discussion. So it is a lonely place, but you need to have the ability to have the resilience, because it's not just about you. It's about the next woman who is looking up to you to say, if she can do it, I can do it too. The next one is that I think often we think that I'm too old to make a difference now. Rosa Parks, when she stood up on the back of the bus in the US, she started a whole civil rights movement. She was 41 years old. Most people know about the story of Rosa Parks. They don't know how old she was because it's irrelevant. We have the ability to reinvent ourselves. I mean, I've seen people who will start new careers at the age of 50. You can reinvent yourself. The reality, it's about you making a contribution to society. Make a contribution to your own family. And that is what it's really about. And it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with age. And the same for a youthful person as well. The fact that you're in your 20s or are a teenager does not mean that you can't make a difference. You have to have the ability to not just focus on your own circumstances, but to be able to see beyond what is happening around you. When you think about some of the great leaders that we've had in our country, they had to have been able to see a reflection of themselves that was not in the mirror. For them to believe that they could actually achieve something that was so vastly different from what they were experiencing at the time. And so it's important to be able to think, to have a vision. That is what a vision is about. A vision is about just thinking, just unclutter everything that is happening right now and think about what is it that is within you that you believe is the vision for your life. And it doesn't matter whether it seems achievable or not, but if you're striving towards it, at least you are working towards making a change in your life. And often people will talk about, when we talk about what it is that we want to do, talk about it as if it's something that is unreachable, as if it's going to take a miracle. Make use of every opportunity that you have. The opportunity of being here this morning. You don't know who it is that could be relevant to your business, to your life, that you could meet here today just through a conversation. You don't know how just a conversation could trigger a thought that could be relevant to you and important to you. And so be ready all the time. And be ready means don't wait for something to happen. Just always get yourself ready all the time. Whether it is through studying, whether it is through whatever it is that you do, so that when an opportunity comes, you are ready to take it. Because I think one of the saddest things that can happen to people is that opportunities present themselves, but you're not ready. You haven't quite finished that degree, or you haven't quite finished, with that work that you should have done many years ago, or you're not, quite as fit as you would like to be. You're not, just get yourself ready, optimize every single moment that you have. Be ready. And I suppose linked to that is the importance of choosing the right people that you want to bring into your life or your business. Depending on the choices that you make, whoever you choose for your business or for your life will either bring you grief or they will bring you happiness. It's all your own choice. So think carefully about the people that you decide to bring into your life or into your business. And then I guess lastly, it's not just how you start, but how you finish. Many of us think about the things that we would like to do, and we may even start, but we never actually get to doing them or just finishing. If you don't do that, if you don't finish whatever it is that you should have started or completed, you're robbing us, the rest of us in society, of whatever unique idea or concept that you may have. And when you think about people that have made huge differences, it's people that seemed, probably seemed a bit crazy at the time for the ideas that they had, but they had the courage. And so it's important to have that courage to start something, but then finish it. And so I hope that today, that as we look at our lives going forward, that we look at ways in which we can take ourselves to the next gear. And it is important because when we talk about the statistics that I spoke about earlier, the statistics that Cheryl spoke about, it all ultimately comes down to what you and I do. It's you and I that will make up that collective, which will make that difference in the rest of society. And so I hope that you become very uncomfortable and just get shaken out of that complacency zone. For any of you who are there, thank you.